Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in today on actually a very serious viewer question. So we're going to go in depth. It's also the beginning of the holidays. Today's the first night of Hanukkah. We're getting into the Christmas season here. So we've got a little bit of decorations up today, but don't be distracted by that per the message. So we're going to zoom in and focus in on this question, which is, how do you handle a female psychopath in a corporate environment where, certain protocol and policy and procedure is expected? And, how do you deal with this in a very sort of fluid, graceful situation? Especially when you're talking about your employment, your security, and mostly your sanity. So first thing first, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the behaviors that you might see from a female psychopath in the work environment. Number one is to understand that with a female psychopath, you're dealing with someone without a conscience. A conscience, once again, gives you a perception or an observation of morality, of proper judgment, of sort of abiding by normal social norms. I'm going to say, normal social norms. In other words, the unspoken sort of boundaries and, logic that would flow in a corporate environment. In other words, you wouldn't, approach someone's desk because that's their personal workspace. There's, a respect that you give in the corporate environment based on hierarchy, based on channels of command, chain of communication. And one namely thing that can be trigger a lot of anxiety and sort of hyper observation or hypervigilance is the lack of consciousness presents as violating social norms and boundaries in the corporate structure. Corporate structure oftentimes is very organizational. In other words, you behave in a specific way. It's just understood, it's expected. The female psychopath sees that and just, wants to blow that to kingdom come. It does not matter. It does not apply to them. Not only are they above it, they're just plow right through it. So you'll first become aware of there's sort of a presence that will emanate from them and an energy where it gets you sort of distracted. There's something that emanates from them, and it might sound really very woo-woo, but just ignore that. We're talking about a vibe that somebody has. And a psychopath, because of their thought forms, it is important to remember that thoughts are things, and thoughts create energy, and the emotions are there, which then fuel the thoughts. And with a female psychopath, because of a lack of conscious and because of the slowed activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is, the area of the brain which processes judgment and learning and, and moving forward and having a vision, is slowed down. So they're not on the same vision course that most people are. They think that they see way beyond it, and really to exploit and take advantage of the corporate structure that is in place for a reason. It can be very mighty strong. It might be a corporate organization that's been running for 11 years, 20 years, 120 years. Whatever it is, it's an opportunity and a challenge to conquer for this person. It is all about the win. And once again, the amygdala, also that is the area of sort of fear and apprehension, is also non-functioning and reduced size in a female psychopath. So in the corporate environment, they have sort of this fearlessness. In other words, they do things that most people would not do. And so once again, we're going to talk about those right now. What might you see? Walking into, I don't want to say buttering up the chain of command, but really, giving data, asking questions on the fly, usurping information, maybe taping phone calls, just slyly utilizing just sort of a manipulative body language. But, namely, it's that they sort of throw things into an engineered chaos. And it's to understand that they might be going in people's offices. They might not be at their desk at certain times. Their reports might be hugely inflated. They might start, just sort of erasing things that they don't want to be tracked in the corporate environment. In other words, they're deleting their search pages. They're oftentimes want to be sort of invisible. You might not see them in a lot of pictures, but yet they will manipulate others and use especially the sort of seductive energy that they know will manipulate and trigger people and get people sort of hooked on attention to this person, especially if it means overriding people who are doing an honest job, a good job, a fair job, and have earned credit and tenure. They might be a pillar in the organization. They have a presence. They have a reputation. That is all up for grabs and up for demolishing and destruction from this female. In other words, even without words, just sort of rip it away. There's an energy, once again, that comes from the female psychopathic gaze. It sort of entrances people. People seem to agree with this person, even though it's illogical. Let's put money there. Let's write this there. I'm going to come in and I'm going to dress like this, and this is just how it's going to be. A violation, namely of high risk, which involves high risk behaviors. In other words, because there's no brakes on the car, in other words, certain people, in other words, you don't come into, so once again, we're going to talk about, how to manage and interface with this person, because sometimes you can't go no contact with a female psychopath at the workplace. It's just, inevitable. But depending on, how they're sort of, crossing over and violating, there's this violation energy, which can make it very difficult to work and creates this hypervigilance and paranoia that you have to learn about them or what they're doing or where they're going and how they're manipulating and what departments that they're sort of, making their way into. It's just like, you shouldn't be there doing lunch over in this department. You work over on this side of the building. And it's not just like a friendly lunch. It's because they want information. You'll see them talking to odd people that they really shouldn't be talking to. And it's not an innocent thing. So, so how do you handle this when you kind of see them making their way, doing, whatever, buttering people up so they can get into drawers, get into files, get into positions, find out earlier than other people, take credit for things, tear down your reputation through very insidious and manipulative ways. So it's to say, how do you handle it, especially if you are in an interface? Number one, we're talking about the etheric energy of the female psychopath. There's an energy and a presence that emanates from them where they really get it going because they have a dopamine. Remember that they have an excess of sensitivity to dopamine in the brain and oftentimes a higher amount of testosterone, so they can be very aggressive. When they have this dopamine sensitivity, it's like if they want something, they just start pulling things out of thin air and making things happen. It's just very strange, but it's just like you got to get them under control. The situation has to be under control. So number one I recommend is the pattern interrupt. The pattern interrupt is when, so namely, let's back that up. So we're talking about the energy that comes from a female psychopath. It tends to be very disorienting, very distracting, can change the perception and meaning you have of things. In other words, a door handle is no longer a door handle. You know what I mean? We've talked about that in videos. They will kind of circumvent regular meaning as it assigns to how you communicate. It sounds very strange, but for those of you who have been exposed to a psychopath, you know exactly what I am talking about. Just humor, little blurbs that you need to pay attention to because they're really exposing themselves along the way. So anyway, number one, when we're talking about getting your energy under control, I want you to practice sort of just looking, you have to realize that there's an energy and a boundary of your personal space, that when somebody comes too close, in a professional environment, once again, it's you shake hands, maybe a pat on the shoulder. There's a protocol and a culture, but the female psychopath, wants to rearrange things, but and realize there's an energy that will create a lot of this sort of engineered chaos. So, number one, if you have to interface, to understand your energy is to understand your energy and to be in it 100% when you're interfacing with them. In other words, you bring your eyes down just a little bit and just, look at just sort of right in front of your face. Keep your eyelids sort of half open and just sort of understand your energy as it surrounds yourself, your entire body, your energy surrounding your feet, your calves, your knees, your thighs, up through the torso, surrounding your shoulders, surrounding your head, and particularly, glowing and strong and radiant light, especially where the head and then the heart are coming forward. So it's a visualization and understanding your physical boundaries and having a presence of that. So it's a visualization exercise, namely to know where your calm and your center is. It's very important to handle a female psychopath at the workplace that you are 100% neutral, disinterested, meaning, getting your energy to where you're not impressed and you're not degraded, you're not reactive, you're indifferent. So you really need to adopt when you focus on this energy as coming from a space of neutrality. No, you're not flinching or jumping at their charts. You're not oohing and eyeing when she's going over there and doing something with the boss. You're not trying to keep mental tabs of the map of what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. There comes also an importance where you get that energy under command. It's a practice in the privacy of this video, and really, it's getting into a complete and utter state of calm and serenity. And if you are one with intrusive thoughts, if you're one with repetition, repetitive thoughts, obsessive thoughts, realize it's time now to get those under control and to get off that train of get off the train of the incessant thoughts or the unwanted thoughts, the recurring thoughts, that intrusive thoughts, I think, is the word that is created. There's an intrusiveness that is experienced when you're around them. You feel that there's an intruder, a trespasser, a wrongdoer, and you need to be the lawmaker. You need to be the lawmaker. You are the lawmaker of how you feel, not this other entity. We're just going to call it an energy right now, because really that's what it is. And oftentimes it's a very foreign energy, so one does not often know how to deal with it. So, understanding that and so that you're not strange, you're in corporate environments, especially in the upper levels, you're going to encounter these people. Some are, I would say, they might do a great job. They might be, benign, but there are others who sort of single others out, and you don't want to be that target. But anyway, so coming back to the energy, it's coming from a complete, I don't want to say deadened space, but a complete sense of neutrality and indifference. In other words, what they do, you're indifferent to. What they say, you're coming from a space of neutrality. So you're coming from you're not trying to, get into a fight, a spat, an interaction. I would keep interaction at a minimum. And then, so understanding your energy and how it has to be, and conducting that and being, the lawmaker of how you feel, and working on your physical stance. It sounds so, it sounds, like a mom would say, but you really need to be in command of your physical carriage, of how you carry yourself. Be present. Be present. Be all there, and not have your mind going to the future or the past, It is working on being very present. And stopping those intrusive thoughts, letting them go, letting them fly, giving them to the master of the universe. Say, Master, I want you to take all this negative energy. It's too much for me to handle. I'm going to release it and giving it to you now. So getting it out of your system, that sort of paranoia that can occur. I get this. So then, namely then, after that, I recommend the pattern interrupt. The pattern interrupt is a very important style of communication, I feel, to take with a psychopath. In other words, it's not a direct exchange. And while doing this, you also have to be aware of your body language. So the pattern interrupt also involves understanding your body language, and rather than being face to face with them, it's very important to sort of turn your body so that your shoulder is sort of butted up against them. If they're looking at you, your body is pivoted away so that your heart space is not. There goes. Okay, sorry, I know we're talking about serious stuff, and we're all on the fly here. Should we get Santa back up? Where was he? Okay, anyway. See, you like what I'm doing right now? This is a pattern interrupt. We're no longer talking about the same thing. All of a sudden, we're on another plane or focus. So the pattern interrupt. Excuse me for that. And I apologize if I've offended anybody. But this is live here. This is raw. This is the real deal. So anyway, the pattern interrupt involves understanding your body language and pivoting yourself so that your body is not the plane of your body, especially your heart, is not directed to them. So be aware of adjustment. And so, in other words, it's a self-protection. You're coming from in a different state. You're using that pattern interrupt, which we're going to discuss right now. But you're holding your body up so that you're present and you're feeling yourself in your best posture. So you're postured. You're positioned. You have an executive stance. Your body speaks, outward and exudes positive energy, but that is indifferent. In other words, it's running positive. It's not worried about what they're doing. Do not get caught up in the negativity of what they're doing. It's important for you to house this positivity. There's a great Ned talk. I can't remember the name right now, Amy Gertie or somebody. I apologize that I'm sort of all over the place, but she talks about, the executive stance and, holding yourself very strong and intact. So, and I talk also about people who have been victimized by people who are psychopathic, is that it's important to resensitize yourself. When you're working around them, utilize things that are really use your senses, your eyes, your ears, that you are the lawmaker over what you're seeing, hearing, feeling. So, wearing comfortable clothes, really comfortable new socks, new shoes, things that you are within that is new, that, is yours, and that you're sort of upped your stimulation by, if that makes any sense. And so the pattern interrupt is where they come at you with a question, or they come at you and you have to have a face-to-face with them. I'm not sure, this viewer didn't ask, they didn't give me too much details, but if you have to go face-to-face with them, okay, the body language, and you do not make eye contact. You do not make eye contact with these people. You do not. You look either at their ear, you look at their eyebrow, you look at the center of their head, you look at their hairline. You don't engage them in the eyes. A little bit, maybe up here. Again, you want to do it with grace and fluidity and just own it. It has to be you, authentically you. It's just, you're not going to get into any friction. This is a well-oiled way to handle it. So it's coming from that space, and the pattern interrupt so that you can retain and not get caught up in their sort of psychopathic, vacuous energy, which oftentimes they will try to manipulate with their conversation. I'm not sure if you interface with them, but do not make the eye contact. And a pattern interrupt is where they will ask you a question. Let's say they're asking you a question about a report, and then rather than keeping in alignment with their energy and giving them a direct response, a pattern interrupt is where you then ask a question that is perhaps on a tangent or another core of the concept, where you sort of then take ownership of the conversation. It's very subtle. It's a pattern interrupt. In other words, if someone goes, "Isn't it a nice day out?" And they're trying to look for agreement, and then you just say, "I am so busy with my gardening," and it's in other words, you don't reply directly, or you ask a question. "It's a lovely day, isn't it?" And then have you gone? And then so rather than asking about the weather, then you say, "Well, how is the Cub game, or how is the Dodger game, or how is the Colts game?" It's I'm watching the Colts game. You return a question directly to them that's slightly off topic, that might pertain to your work or something of that nature, so you finesse it. It's very important that you do that and then get a way to sort of wiggle out, and you address their questions oftentimes with a question that is not directly in an energetic reply to them. Does that make sense? Because you need to hold your ground, and you need to show them that you cannot be messed with, that you will not, in other words, you don't verbally aggress to them, unless aggression is what you're, welcomed or, honored or respected in your culture, in your company. I would be interested in more information. However, it's important that you don't buckle down to their attempts, and if they're doing something, to call it out right away, and to put an end to whatever you feel is in a demise or interrupting and destructive of you, that's causing perhaps intrusive thoughts, worry, concern, paranoia. You're feeling like you have to be the next Sherlock Holmes to figure this situation out. But it's very subtle, and they're just realize that they're going to do things. They're going to do things that are going to, we're just going to take Santa, I don't know what Santa's going to do right now. See how, okay. Anyway, so you are going to understand that you know what you're dealing with. And so you have to convey in an indifferent way that you know what that you're dealing with this person. You're not going to play dumb, play stupid, not handle it. You need to curtail it and curb it, especially if there's anything going on that will affect you or your department directly, that throws you off. It's a tension. So realize that it's important for you to stay out of that energy and not feel that you have to mimic it, reply directly to it. In other words, keeping your train of thought that gets your content, your information that is required, with and from this person on a back and forth basis, but in such a way that you are not directly replying to them. I can give more examples if you like. And because you don't want to feel or show that you're sort of one of their bunch. You don't have to be in their circle. It's very important that you are observing. Just observe in a dispassionate way so that you can learn. Unfortunately, it's not going to be like every other interaction in the company. It's this person is going to feel different. They, when they're gone, you feel everything is at ease. And then when you're there, it's a tension. It's this sort of, they want to take control. They have an insatiable need for control and power. So it's a power thing. And they think that if there's something that they want, they're just going to get it. they're going to do it. They're going to talk to the people. And the problem is it's the unseen of what they're doing that's a concern. What is it that they're doing? All of a sudden you walk and then you find out, why are they, watching this meeting from outside in the hall? All sorts of stuff. You're like, it can be a real problem. It can take down a company. You find that they're buddying up with certain secretaries, certain administrative staff. They're giving out hot dogs, cookies, whatever it is, lollipops, and they're just, it's like they feel that it's just an engineered chaos. And even though they might be doing good, there's something else going on. Pay attention to your gut and then write it out. Keep a little notebook for yourself so you can get the feelings out. I think it's very important that you do that, because you can acknowledge and validate, and then you have a very clear, written, documentation of how you're feeling. This doesn't feel right. Odd things that they do, where they put their body. You're at a meeting and they're just standing in a strange place, and then they do things with their body. You might almost feel that they're writing out a name, while they're talking, and then they're getting this subliminal stuff going on, and it can be very eerie. So I'm not sure all what you're dealing with, but a female psychopath can take over a whole bunch of stuff. Let's just put it this way. They're not team players. They go through situations and just get what they want from it. And so, utilizing these tools is important, and that you don't make your time there feel aggravated or agitated. That you don't worry. They might leave certain things out. They might park their car in weird places, leaving their lunch, leaving receipts, doing strange things with their files, hanging things that, you can see it. So if, don't feel strange if you just want to write these things down, because otherwise, if you keep them in your mind, it's just going to replay again and again and again. So, writing them down will help that, I'm not sure if you have that circuitous thought. I really don't know the details, but when you can, Robert Hare's Snakes in Suits, Thomas Sheridan, Puzzling People, they talk about this. And a psychopath, if there's other psychopaths in the organization, they know who's who, what's what, and they know, that each other is targeting specific people. So, namely, before we wrap this up, you don't want to be on their radar. If you've been sort of buddied up with them, and you bit the fruit, or you drank the Kool-Aid, or whatever it is, it might be time to say, oops. They will get people into a situation that they're violating their own values, and that you kind of feel maybe it's like professional growth. I don't know if you're like how things are going with them, but you need to kind of disengage and not feel angry that you're losing something, because otherwise, if it gets really bottled up, it can become a real issue for you. It can cause a lot of stress. You feel that you're not comfortable in your home. You're not comfortable in your car. You're not comfortable at work. This person is kind of on your mind all the time. Remember that the psychopath, namely, how they operate, is that they will interject communication at really off times, in an off way, so that you're sort of looking at them like, and then they want you to always be thinking about them. The psychopath wants they want themselves to always be top of mind. In other words, because of them, this happened, because of me, because I did this, and they'll refer to themselves, in strange ways. They might talk about themselves in the third person, or give themselves titles like, I'm the master this, or I'm the chief that. They'll just sort of, build up certain reputation that gets everybody going, oh, So be very careful that you don't buy into that feeling that, oh my God, they're doing this, like this has to be stopped, like a tidal wave or something, or like a tsunami. It feels like something is happening that's out of control. Um, so realize that they're going to do things. They might send out memos. They might talk while you're working and just sort of be in an odd position. Um, you know we know what they're we know that's their game, but you can outsmart it. You can definitely outsmart it by being dispassionate and observing and not buying into their little trail of very sort of convoluted, manipulative, sort of setting the trap, doing strange things. You know, just observe and don't get riled up. Just observe, like, there's a punk, and you can give new meaning as sort of reframing things. And then rather than this is that's call them the punk, call them the glob, call them the whatever, create a name that sort of gives them, you know, keeps them down and away, and visualizing them very small, walking around. Maybe they're just 1 inch tall. Imagine them as just 1 inch walking around, and use because you do have creative power when dealing with this. You don't want to get into mind games. You don't want to get into challenges. You want to deal with things dispassionately, and with neutrality and indifference, and don't let anything be taken from you professionally. It's very important that you guard and protect yourself and not be distracted. And the pattern interrupt will help you sort of, whoosh, pass them. And so you maintain your demeanor. I think that's the word. It's having a very strong and secure demeanor. So if you've come off maybe flamboyant, or you've gotten, I'm not even sure, but psychopaths will, they'll pick people up. I mean, they will, you know they will just get a posse going. They can be very gregarious. They can seem to be very charming. I mean, these women can just be just star-like. They can be like starlets, and they know what they're doing. But remember, it is all an act. I mean, it is something that they turn on and turn off. It's not who they are. It's just a creation, a filament. And so at the molecular level, you need to own yourself at the molecular level. Your power is going to be in that unseen, presence and confidence and faith. And they will go through jobs, they will go through people like water.